Hi, it's Helen here, and welcome to week 11. Wow, one more week to go. It's incredible, isn't it? Well, two more weeks, including this week, I suppose. It's incredible how time has gone so fast. I don't know about you, but I can't believe we're in week 11 already. And this week, I want to talk to you about the art of following up because now we're starting to get prospects and hopefully some potential clients coming through. And maybe I've heard reports from one or two of you that you've actually started getting some sales coming through as well. So depending on how quickly your lead time is, in other words, the time that it takes from someone to go from a prospect to a client, you may well be seeing some clients coming through as well now, which would be brilliant. And I love good news and success stories, so please let me know if that's happening to you. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about this week is some advanced marketing and some of the things you can do to really get the client moving forward or potential client moving forward. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about why it's important to follow up. And I'm also going to be introducing you to something that I found out about 6 months ago now, and I thought, wow, this is an incredible idea actually, and it's something that we've started implementing in a different way. So I'll talk to you about that in a second. It's called the Potential Client Pack. I'm going to talk to you about a typical follow-up sequence that you might want to do, how much to follow up, because believe me, following it up can push a few buttons. And we're also going to be talking a bit about buyer's remorse and the onboarding process. Um, but let's start with why it's important to follow up, and I'll tell you about my own experience with following up. A couple of experiences actually. So, first experience that I had about following up was when I was very new to the business, so probably only about 6 months to a year in, and I realised I was actually really bad at following up. So if someone has said to me, "Oh, really want to work with you," no problem. If someone has said to me, "This person's interested in your work," might have been okay about that. But anyone who said, "Can we just have a conversation?" I was really bad at picking up the phone and just following up with that person. I was also really bad at sending out proposals to people as well, and I can still procrastinate on that. Naughty. I've now got it a bit better so that we have templates and things like that in place. So it doesn't take me as long as it once did, but I can still really procrastinate on it. And yeah, I really have to work at following up. But I also want to tell you about an experience I had probably about a year ago now with a company that was based in the States, and they run a program that I was really interested in at the time, actually. So I had a call with a salesperson, and I said to her, "Okay, this sounds quite interesting. Can you put this in writing for me?" She was like, "Oh, it's not something that we do." "What do you mean it's not something that you do?" "Well," she said, "well, people either, are interested and move forward or they're not." I thought, okay, well, in my case, I am interested, but I would like a few days to think about it. So she very reluctantly put something in writing for me. Um, but then I never heard anything again. And do you know, the interesting thing was I was interested. I would have probably moved forward. I just needed a bit of reassurance from them and a bit of persuasion, and a bit of, there's all sorts of things that they could have done to move me forward, but they didn't. And so I didn't take them up on the offer. Interesting, isn't it? And another example, ages ago, one of the because we used to, when I first started the business, we used to work from my home. We don't anymore. We've got offices now, and I'm very glad I went down that route. But one of the routes we were considering when we were looking at how we expanded, and because we needed more space at the time, we did look at building a home office in the garden. So we looked at, one of the purpose-built buildings for that. Now, at the time, that would only house 7 or 8 people. So I'm really glad we didn't go down that route and went down the office route eventually, because we now have 12 people in the office. So it definitely wouldn't have fitted us then. But we had quite a few people around to give us quotes, and we were seriously looking into it. Do you know, not one person actually followed up after they sent the quote. Some people didn't even send the quote. It's incredible how bad generally people are about following up. And this might be an area that's pushing some buttons for you as well. generally people do not feel comfortable about following up. It's an area that I've personally had to work on. I'm pretty good at it now, actually, and I've got loads of clients simply because I have followed up with people. But it's an area that pushes a lot of buttons, and we don't like to hassle people. Um, you're probably based in the UK, so we come from a culture where we kind of think, oh, people come back to us if they're interested. But you know what? People don't always come back to us, but they still might be interested. They just might not have the time, and people might expect you to follow up with them. People do expect you to follow up with them. I certainly did in the cases that I've had. So follow-up's really, really important. And it's something that we've touched on throughout the rest of this program, but it's not something we've specifically spoken about. So I wanted to do that today because actually you can use some advanced marketing techniques, which I know some of you are interested in learning about the more advanced stuff, to really, really get people moving forward and taking people to the next level. The other thing about follow-up is people are not always ready to buy immediately. They do need a little bit of work. I've put on the right-hand side there a typical buying cycle. And it's quite a simplified version. I have a more complex one, but it does the job. So, people do kind of think I need something, do their research, look at what's out there, look at whether it's worth it, say yes, no, and then, the thing about number 5 there is, did I make the right choice? So that's kind of where you're coming into buyer's remorse. But when you start looking at people on LinkedIn, they probably have done number 1, I need something, and they're probably in the middle of between 2 and 3. So looking at what's out there and kind of considering whether it's worth your proposition, talking to you, taking things further with you. And then if they do speak to you, they're definitely, and you tell them about your business and you make them an offer, they definitely will be considering, is this worth it? And be between 3 and 4 there in that model, and be thinking, is it worth it? Am I going to say yes or am I going to decline this? And your follow-up can really help them take this to the next level. So let's talk about a way to follow up then. So this is a method that I got from a chap called Ollie Luke. I will give you his website if anyone is interested. I think it is ollieluke.com. But let me just check on that. Ollie Luke is a marketeer, and he's a very interesting marketeer because he's currently looking at direct mail and how you can use direct mail further. In other words, sending your letters out through the post. But yeah, it's ollieluke.com. So if you want to have a look at his website and sign up for some of his stuff there. But I was quite interested in him because I knew Ollie before he really focused on direct mail. And he used to send out, well, he used to create a club actually about advanced marketing techniques. And this is one of the techniques that they had in there. So that's how I got to know about this. But do you know what? I thought it was really interesting, really clever. And it's not something that I've specifically seen done before. So it's something that we've been taken to the next level as well. Basically what he said is, when you get a potential client, send something out through the post to that potential client that answers all their questions and helps them to take the next step. So he said things like, within that pack might be an article, might be some frequently asked questions, might be some case studies, might be an article specifically written on why you should say no to our proposition, which he said can be quite clever from a reverse psychology point of view. But he was saying, send it out in a massive pack that looks really, really impressive. And A, you will really stand out in the marketplace. And B, you're really doing your follow-up as well. And I thought that was quite a, sort of different way of looking at follow-up and what you can send to people. So we've taken elements of that and adapted it into our own kind of sequence, checklist, whatever you want to call it. So this is our sequence. Ignore the flowchart on the right hand side. It's just a picture I took off the internet to sort of demonstrate this, but our sequence isn't as complicated as that. So this is a sequence for someone that's said they want to have a call from LinkedIn, and this is what happens before, during, and after the call. So when they book a call with us, and we are moving to appointments only calls. So we talked previously about acuity scheduling and tools like that. And with that, people can actually book themselves into an appointment slot and time. And we're trying to go down that route a bit more. It is hard because I'm more about just sort of having a chat with people, but it is a good idea to tie them into an actual appointment time, because we do find sometimes people are very, very, very hard to get hold of. So anyway, let's say they've come back to me on LinkedIn or whatever and said, yes, we'd like to have a further conversation. So at that point, we send them out we say, thank you very much, lovely to speak to you. We'll speak to you on Tuesday at 10 o'clock or whatever. Before we speak, you might want to have a quick look at this video that we've put together. And the first video in the sequence is it shows them why this method that we use works. And it talks them through some of the issues with marketing and why more traditional marketing methods don't always work anymore, and feast and famine situations and that sort of thing. And then it sort of ends with kind of book a conversation with us. Obviously they have at that point, but it sort of starts educating them. And we have had a couple of people come back to us afterwards saying, oh, actually, I don't think this would work for me. Which case, do you know what? That's fine. They've taken themselves off this sequence, and it means we're not wasting their time. They're not wasting our time. All good. Okay, but then let's say we've had the call. So the next thing we do is we send them a quick thank you email, and we send them a PDF summary of the process and how it works. And we may put in a couple of bits about summarising our call as well, and may invite them to have a further conversation or send them some dates to meet or whatever it is. Then, using all sorts of different types of messaging, and people learn in different ways. So we're using visual, auditory, we're using videos, we're using posts, etc. We've got a little book of ET that we send them in the post. Now, we don't send this to everyone, so if I get off a call and I think, that person, I don't think is that interested, I might not send this to them, because obviously it's more expensive to send something out through the post. But 9 times out of 10, we do send out this little book just through the post to start them walking through the process. We also add them to our newsletter list as well. Obviously, we've got permission from them on the call to do that, but it's good for them to have newsletters and things, because it carries on educating them. And then probably 2 or 3 days later, I'll send them some case studies. And notice that I don't send them the case studies earlier on in the sequence, because I could have sent them just after the initial call that I've had with them, but I've chosen to use it as another part of the sequence as well. Then a couple of days later, we'll send them a recap video. So we'll send them a video that recaps the process a little bit. And then we also send them a couple of days later a frequently asked questions. And that's the end of the sequence then. So there is another part of the sequence which I'll tell you about in a second. But if they're not responding or buying at this point, I'm kind of thinking, don't think you're that interested really, and I might move on. Interspersed with all of this is the other part of the sequence, is the fact that we do call them every single week as well, after they've had that initial call, to see whether they want to take this forward and things like that. And if they do, I may well pause this follow-up sequence, depending on what stage they're at, to not send them anything else because they're going further or we're meeting or whatever. Similarly, I also have a follow-up sequence after they've had a meeting as well. So I can go through that too, just to move them to the next level after they've had a meeting. But do you see how, mapping this process out, having a checklist almost that we can tick off that we sent them something is really beneficial? And can you see how this kind of will move them forward to the next stage in the process? So this might be something that you want to think about for your business. This is more advanced, so you may want to leave this a few weeks yet. It's entirely up to you. But certainly once you start getting prospects, and some of them will move forward and become a client, and some of them won't. And you'll want to get better at that, and you'll want to get more people saying yes. So this is about how you can do that and helping people to get to the next level. Okay, so coming back to mindset about following up, how much to follow up. So I would definitely say more than you think. So this here has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps in it, but I also call them as well, so it's probably got 20 steps in there. Um, do I think that's too much? No, not really, because I think people do need some follow-up. Now, you may think it is too much and you may halve this list or quarter this list, whatever, but you see, I think some follow-up is better than none. And this is exactly what I got from that other company that I was speaking to earlier, or some of the people who we were talking about the home office in the garden. Um, sometimes I got nothing, no follow-up at all. And to be honest, I think that's probably a little bit harsh. Um, I also have a rule of three to stop you hassling. So um, you can switch this to a rule of 10, whatever you want to do. But basically, my rule of three basically says if you're contacting people 3 times and you're getting nothing back from them, you might want to think about pausing your follow up until you do. But if they break that rule of three at any point, then you can resurrect that again. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have that initial call with them, then you try to ring back a week later to see what their thoughts were, and it just goes to voicemail and they don't ring you back. That's number one. Let's say you try a week later and you send them, give them a call, it still goes to voicemail and they don't come back to you. And then week 3, you give them another call and they still don't come back to you. You also drop them an email at that point and they still don't come back to you. Well, that's 3 times, so they're not coming back to you. I would say at the moment they're not interested, and then you can put them on a to call back in about 6 months or email back in about 6 months. But let's run through that process again. So you call them first time, you leave a voicemail, they don't come back to you. You call them a second time, you leave a voicemail, but this time they ring you back and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've been on holiday," or whatever it was. Because they've interrupted that process of that rule of 3, I normally say they've interrupted it, so you can start again with that rule of 3. But that rule of 3 can be quite a good way to stop you hassling them and stop you feel as though you're putting on an immense amount of pressure when it comes to following up. But having said all that, I do want you to push your comfort zone just a little bit and to follow up slightly more than you naturally would, because you'll find that you'll get some good prospects. There's something interesting that I was reading the other day. So something like 70% of people will buy after the 7th follow up, but very often salespeople don't get there. So people do take a little bit longer than you think and need still nurturing and supporting and reassuring. And to be honest, that's all sales is about reassuring someone to get them to move forward and to take that next step. So push your comfort zone just a little bit on the follow up. Okay, just to talk very quickly about buyer's remorse and onboarding. So the follow up that we've just been talking about also does reply once someone's bought as well. Buyer's remorse is like this little chap on the right hand side saying, "Oh dear God, I've spent all this money, what have I done?" And buyer's remorse is really real and does happen. So I think it's really important to have a kind of an onboarding sequence. So someone has just bought from you. What do you get immediately? How does it work for them? What could you send them through the post? Could you send them, a cup of tea, some chocolates, whatever, through the post, just to kind of say welcome on board? Do you have a welcome on board pack? What could you send to them? And again, having a written down sequence or process that you can just tick off as you follow that process as you're going through can really, really help someone who's just bought and might be thinking, should I have done that? I spent a lot of money now. But this is all about thinking through the person's journey with you, and it will also help your customer service. It will also help customer retention too. So, there's no bad things about this really, but I am aware it is more an advanced technique, and if this is something that you're still working on, this might be a little bit early for you. So this might be something that you think about in 3 months' time. Okay, so if you want to do that, more than welcome to do it. But that might be a time to come back to this training and think about how you could apply this to your business. So I hope you found this session useful. Next week we're going to be looking at, which is our final week, blimey, we're going to be looking at things like LinkedIn profiles, We're also going to be looking at GDPR and how this affects all of the marketing that we've been doing as well, and just kind of summarising things and ending the programme. And also telling you about next steps should you wish to have a further conversation about that. So until then, wish you all the best, and I'll speak to you then. Bye.